Welcome back. Do you have so much to say and you don't know how to say it? Do you have no vehicle to say the things that you're so passionate about? Do you ever try poetry? Our next guest not only uses poetry, but uses it beautifully to say what she feels. My name is Vin Dacquino. Her name is Terry Dugan. Terry, a pleasure. So glad to have you here. We've worked together for quite a while in the Mahopac Writers Group. I had a chance to hear what you really think about. What are those things you think about, Miss Terry Dugan?
Well, I think I was born with a lot to say because before I could even read, I was writing in my little golden books.
Oh, wow.
And just obliterating all the words that were already there. And I took it from there. My very first publication was in a high school newspaper, and it was about spending a summer working with children with developmental disabilities.
Wow.
And it was a very interesting experience, but also an experience that you could get passionate about because you want to help, you want to be there, you want to be there.
Yeah, and you feel like you're doing something.
Yeah. So I didn't really major in any kind of literary stuff at all. I wanted to do something a little bit more practical and useful, and spent my life doing things like organizing daycare centers, working in daycare centers. Then, by accident, got a job with a Hearst and became a writer.
Oh, wow.
And that gave me
Hearst
the
Publications.
Yes, that
Wow.
gave me the medium for my messages. And for some years, I was a magazine writer and a freelance magazine writer. And then one day I said, I forgot that this was supposed to be a vehicle for my passion. And I just said, I've got to walk away from it. And I became a researcher at Bellevue Hospital in the pediatric AIDS clinic in 1986, when no one was really aware that women and children were getting AIDS and dying.
Pediatric AIDS clinic. Oh,
Yeah,
my
it
God.
was-
It must have been so draining. And so, rewarding on one end, but so disconcerting on another.
When I went in, they knew that I had been a journalist and a magazine writer, and they said, "We think you should write about this, but not now."
Oh.
And they weren't kidding. For 5 years, I spent I worked 6 days a week for 4 to 5 years, and I did all kinds of things: clinical trials, research with the mothers, follow-ups, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, it was a version of hell on earth that I wouldn't wish on anybody else.
Wow.
And in those days we had nothing, nothing for anybody. We couldn't save anybody. We couldn't stop anything. But I did a lot of research and tried to help in any way I can. After that, this was my reward. I spent 10 years as a sex researcher, also researching AIDS and HIV. But that was a lot more fun, and certainly not hell on earth. But then after that all ended, I decided to go back to school and get an MFA, a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And that's when the passion, the message, and the medium all came together for me. And my first poetry was about AIDS and about working in the pediatric AIDS ward. And I won a lot of awards. And I was invited to the UN to read my
Wow.
poems. But when I really started to get crazy was, when things started to heat up, like, when we had, in the early aughts, we had the Iraq War, and people were coming back, and people were now more verbal about their experiences and how awful they were for them. People losing limbs, people losing their minds. So, this is how I feel about what I should do at that point. This is a quote I'd like to give you. "What is poetry which does not save nations or people?" That's from Czeslaw Milosz, who's a Czech writer. And that's how I approached my poetry. I tried to use it to call attention to the suffering that people were going through on all sides. The needless deaths of civilians, the needless mutilation and deaths of our own children. And it got really hot when Parkland happened. Parkland happened in February of 2018.
Tell me about Parkland.
Oh, Parkland was a terrible, terrible thing. 17 people were shot in 6 minutes.
Oh,
it
God.
just blows my mind. And 14 of them died. But here's the really strange thing, and the really awful thing is, since then, this is just last year, 1,200 kids have died from guns.
Oh my God.
1,200.
That's
Okay?
a whole lot.
The death rate of children killed by guns in the United States is 6 to 9 times higher than any other developed nation, according to a study. In 2017, there were 2,462 school-aged children killed by firearms. Okay? That's kind of unacceptable. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's 8 kids a day.
I mean, what really is troubling for me is that some of those children were killed by children.
Well, yeah, that's what happened at
basically
Parkland.
Young
Yeah.
people, and who just they didn't know where to turn.
Well, they actually, if you look at Parkland, the kid who shot all the other kids, he reached out for help. People reached out for help around him. I have a list of all the times that authorities were contacted about him. Everybody dropped the ball. Okay, so since then, this year alone, there have been 26 school shootings as of May 15th,
Wow.
2019.
Wow.
Are we learning anything? Are we learning any lessons? Can we go anywhere with this?
Yeah.
Let me just say, there was a poll shortly after Parkland, and it said that 60%, when hearing about mass shootings, say their first reaction is that the country needs stricter gun laws. So we're not paying attention. We're not paying attention.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to read
And the title of this book
is "I'm the Reason the Kids Are Dead." I'm trying to remind people that we have a responsibility. It doesn't matter to me which side of the debate you're on. You must come and take responsibility for your position. Whether you're saying no, we have plenty of gun laws, or whether you're saying no, we need more, you must come forward and take responsibility. Anyway, this sort of started my second career as a talking poet. I mean, I've written poetry, obviously, and then published it and everything, but I usually didn't get up to read. And now, the day, literally the day after Parkland, I wrote a poem and got up at an open mic and started reading. This is what I read. The new curriculum, February 15, 2018, the day after the Parkland, Florida shooting. Today's pop math quiz. How many screaming students fit into a classroom closet when the shooting starts? Today's chemistry lab work. What chemical cleans the blood in the hallways, on computers, lockers, desks? Today's phys ed drill. How fast can you run when you see a gun? How quick can you drop and roll? Today's government and civics quiz. If 90% of Americans shout gun control, what percent of Congress will shut them down? Today's health education test. How do you perform CPR on a kid bleeding from an AR-15 semi-automatic? Today's history question. How soon will we forget your dead classmates and teachers? Remember the thoughts and prayers from the political leeches.
Wow.
So, it's sort of, and you know what? It sort of happened. I mean, it's definitely happened because there were lots and lots of protests, and there was a big march right after Parkland. It was called March for Our Lives. And 2 million people in the United States at 750 different sites came out and supported the Parkland students, but we haven't seen much, it's sort of petered out.
Yeah.
And except
And
for
the
the fact that
dead
we
are still dead.
Yes, and they always will be. But let me tell you, I'm not worried about the dead because they're rest in peace, as they say. These are 2 found poems. Found poem is a poem that I didn't write the words, but I picked them from the words that were floating around at the time. These are verbatim texts between the brothers Sam, 18, and Matthew, 14, who were students at Parkland High School on February 14, 2018. Are the cops here? My teacher died. He's sitting in the doorway. Are you okay? Hopefully. Just know I love you. I love you too. Forever and your best brother. What an experience to have as a child in school.
And
to
to have
see
to
your
say and to realize what you're
you were a
facing.
teacher. What if you were sitting, slumped in the
tell me.
doorway, dead?
My first experience and my first loss as a teacher was a young girl who didn't die by gunfire. The boiler under her bedroom malfunctioned and she died from the smoke. Mm-hmm. I'm still not over it, and that was over 40 years ago. when you lose a student, when you lose a child, you lose a student, you lose a child. And no child should leave before his time. And we have to treasure every life. And whatever we can do to keep our children alive, we have to do. And you're right. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. Pick a side and fight for it. And believe in what you believe in. And if it's through poetry or through compositions or whatever it is, speak.
Speak
Because
now.
your voice needs to be heard.
Speak now, because
Yeah.
we're running out of time to talk about
Yeah.
it. This is another set of texts and tweets. These are from Parkland survivors 2 months later. This shows you how it just never will go away. I think about it every day. It's something I can't control. What stays with me is hearing one of my classmates cry for help. That's been really hard, knowing that we were the very few who saw her in her final moments, and we couldn't do anything. As soon as those bullets stopped ringing in our room, I was like, why us? Those first 7 to 10 shots do rattle in my mind. Through the walls, I noticed that there's probably my old self, just sitting there in the corner, still thinking about if I'm going to live or die. What a thing to think about when you're 17
Yeah.
years old. You know, it's not fair. It's just not fair to them.
Yeah.
You know. So to round out my little Parkland thing, a year later, two people committed suicide. 2 survivors committed suicide. And right after the first survivor committed suicide, I woke up one morning, and most poets and most writers will say that sometimes when they wake up or before they fall asleep, they think of a phrase or they have an image that suddenly comes up to them, and they have to do something about it. They have to write it down, or they have to write a short story or poem or something about it. This whole poem came to me as I woke up a day or two after the suicide.
Wow.
It never happened before. I was shocked. Not if, but when. Was it the darkness at noon? Was it the wide awakeness at midnight? Was it the thoughts and prayers ricocheting through the empty halls at high school? Was it the chorus of do-gooders singing, so brave, so brave, so brave? Was it the counselors chirping about your inner strength and outer resilience? Or was it the other way around? Was it the silent stares of strangers or the cheerfulness of neighbors? Was it the empty desk in front of yours? Was it the earnest journalists in front of the school? Was it the politicians polling to see which way their votes should go? Was it the senseless slaughter in New Zealand that finally convinced you to go for it? Was it because I didn't lie down next to you and breathe?
Wow.
I mean, it's all questions that
Yeah.
when a suicide happens, you want to ask these questions.
Oh, yeah. You know, and you just wonder, could I have said something? I mean, I've lost students to suicide as well. And then you say, could I have said something? What do you say? How do you keep people from telling themselves that it's not worth living? How do you make life valuable for people? And there's so many things that children see. I mean, I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is put the news on. It's the most depressing thing you can do. Is there anything cheerful? Never. Never. I switch channels 4 times, and it's just depressing. And we have to give our children a purpose to live. And not only children, as I get older, I look and say, have I really made any impact in my life for others? Have I saved anyone? And if I did, is there a way that I could save more? And can I save myself?
Well, that's the question. I mean, I think poets and writers do save themselves by doing this. I mean,
Yeah.
how many writers have told me, if I didn't do this, I'd have killed myself,
Yeah.
or I would have gone. I'd be in a mental institution in a straitjacket.
Yeah.
And that's a completely valid thing. This started with me when I was in pediatric AIDS.
Right.
Obviously, I couldn't cure anything or couldn't
Oh.
save anything, but I was there. I was there for many, many people. I was there at the deathbeds,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm actually writing a book about it. It's called Women and Children Last. Women and children last, and that's
Yeah.
still the way we treat them in this society. You know.
I wrote a book called Return of the Cicada, and it's a novel about a young boy who had a blood transfusion back in the 70s, and he had the HIV virus, and he is dying. And he wants to return to the town he grew up in because now both of his parents have predeceased him. He wants to be buried with them, but a bully in town now runs the cemetery and won't allow that to happen. And it's this boy's struggle to at least die with dignity. And when I think of AIDS, I think of how difficult it is to die with dignity.
Well, there was a huge stigma around AIDS, a huge
Yes,
stigma.
it's a huge
You
stigma.
at that time when I began working in AIDS, there was there were 3 students who were also infected as a result of transfusions in a town in Florida. They were hemophiliacs. They needed transfusions to stay alive. Well, the town burned down their house to get rid of them so they wouldn't go to school with the other children.
This kid
It's
in
crazy.
this book, Return of the Cicada, had to fight to be buried with his parents because of the stigma that was there. And we do have to understand that. And one of the subplots of this book is about bullying. And, you know, it's so easy to make the day for someone, to make someone smile, and to remember that you may be the only smile that person had all day long. And you have to understand, like with kids, you know, as a teacher, sometimes I forgot that children don't only exist in the classroom. They have a life outside of the classroom. Some of them go home to misery and pain.
Well, see, that's exactly the point I'm going to make in my book, is that in a hospital, they treat your physical conditions, but AIDS and the kids and the mothers who were exposed to it, the context of their life was just as overwhelming and sometimes interfered with the ability of the doctors to take care of them. It's an age-old story. It's just not the child. It's the family. It's the society. Somebody said, "How do you write poems about this stuff? And who are you blaming for that?" And I said, "You know, I wrote a poem about why these things happen.
Yeah.
You know, and about like why kids are getting shot these days. And in it, I say, you know, it's because we have playgrounds where the sandbox is full of glass shards. It's because we take them to churches that teach hate, you know, where they don't, you know, they reject this or they reject that, and they hate. We take them, you know, to, you've probably seen this as a teacher. You see them playing a game, and you see the parents, you know, punching the coach because he's not playing their kids long enough. So the whole context of these kids growing up, they're seeing all this kind of violence around them and hatred and, you know, and neglect. Neglect. We neglect our schools. We neglect their playgrounds. We neglect everything.
Last night I had an amazing experience. I was doing a book talk for Patriot Hero, and one of the women in the audience was sitting like in a back row, and I'm looking at her, and I'm saying, God, she looks familiar. And it turns out I had her 44 years ago.
Well, Vinny, you're only 50 years old.
That's
I mean,
true.
you must have been trying
I was a 6-year-old teacher. And I had her 44 years ago. Do you know what she brought with her to that talk? Her poetry book from that day, from that time. And it's a treasure because poetry is therapy. It's a chance to get inside. And sometimes we need to take out the trash, man. We need to get inside.
I've been taking out the trash for a long time.
I hear you. And we need to connect with the things inside of us that concern us. It would be wonderful if we all had perfect best friends to share our feelings with. It doesn't work that way.
No.
Friends come and go, but your poetry book could last forever.
Well, I have taken solace in poetry, but also, you know, I want to leave a record. I mean, where else are you going? These words from the students, those texts, were published in newspapers and, you know, on the internet.
Right.
But this is a permanent version of them.
Yes.
People will see this as a set piece. They will understand how that, you know, how they can, you know, they can access that and how they can feel about it.
I would love to say through all these books that Vin Dacquino has been here and he had something to say. And whether people really hear it or not, I need to hear it. And I need to believe that there was a purpose for my being here. And I think a lot of these people who have committed suicide gave up believing that there was a purpose to be here. And we have to somehow grasp that purpose.
Well, my purpose is to continuously go into people's faces and say, think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Think about your non-action is killing people
Yeah.
left and right. But I think I started doing that in the 60s. I was a protester against the Vietnam War. I actually made a DVD,
Oh, wow.
a documentary about our time as protesters.
Wow.
There's we have rare footage because my director, I'm the producer, he's the director, he had 23 minutes of film taken during a building demonstration, during a building takeover, where we were protesting the Vietnam War. We were begging our university not to get involved and to pull out and to show some resistance to the mass killings.
And there was actually a website on this, on the screen, how to access that.
Yes, you can
There it is.
buy a copy or you can see it online. You can
Yep.
now we all stream
So
everything.
at least see it and,
Okay.
and understand what it was like.
So I'm used to being a target. I'm used to being in people's faces, and I'm used to having tomatoes and eggs thrown at me, and I don't
Yeah.
mind. You know,
It's okay to be, in my younger life, it was very difficult for me because one side of me wanted to be, the assistant principal called me the people's choice. He said, because I'm always trying to satisfy people. And regardless of what their opinion was, I tried to help them express that opinion, whether I agreed with it or not.
that's the way you should be.
And yet there were times when I just didn't know, and it was a confusing time for me because one side of me wanted to please the people and the other side of me was upset that people didn't hear me. They weren't hearing what I was saying. I was trying to hear them, but I wondered how many people were actually hearing me. And I went more from trying to listen to trying to speak. And my writing has become my voice.
Well, that's what happens at this
Yeah.
point. I'm unlikely to be tear gassed again in the street, I hope.
Yeah.
But my poetry, I hope, will try to get out there and try to. But this poem will make you laugh because.
Good. I need a laugh now.
Yeah,
You
this will
depressed
make-
me, Terry.
I'm sorry. This is you'll laugh at this one. The only good poet is a dead poet.
Oh, there you go.
This was written as a result of Nassau County rejects poet nominee over words about the war in Iraq. We're always getting crap thrown at us, okay? The New York Times, June 4th, 2007. I'm beginning to appreciate why poets are not celebrated till after their deaths. Wayne Wink, Nassau County, New York legislator. The war over the war rages right here on the shore where Whitman, once accused of barbarous, illiterate verse, enshrined as a poet of note by road, school, and mall. A shoo-in, they said, the nature poet, Maxwell Croydon Wheat Jr., laureate for once bucolic place, gone to shopping centers and fenced fortresses. Whitman shunned for making love to the human body. Wheat vilified for blaming war for the corpse of democracy. In Iraq and other killing fields, pleading for peace, he wrote, black hooded prisoner, draped in a makeshift poncho on a narrow box, wire his outstretched hands. Stand Saddam Hussein and George W. Bush on either side. Warn him he will be electrocuted if he falls. I mean, Croydon Wheat was a nature poet, but he was, as a nature poet, he did not approve of war of any sort. And they went after him for it. But so they went after Walt Whitman too.
Yeah.
I mean, many poets have been vilified for their positions. So
In a keynote speech I gave a couple weeks ago to high school students who wrote an anthology, I said to them, is silence golden? And should you respect what you feel? And sometimes our words need to be our gold. And we need to say, first we need to explore, where do we stand? What do we believe? We're teaching children how to be rational in an irrational world. Things go on every single day that make us say, what?
What?
You know, and then those things are revered and accepted. And years later we say, oh my God, did we really believe in that?
No, we didn't. There are many maps of one place and many voices from one time.
Yeah.
I always tell people, if you can speak, you can write, and if you can write, you can rule your world. You can change your world.
Yeah.
You can rock your world.
Yeah.
So you need to, go out there and get it. So my book
Let your
is
voice be heard.
my book is available from my publisher, Moonstone Arts Center.
All right. Can't advertise your book, but what you can say is that you have an awful lot to say.
I do.
And you, Terry, need to keep saying it.
Whoops.
Uh-oh. Who did that?
Wait a minute. You wrote books about paranormal
That's right.
activity.
There it is. That
There you,
was
I know. I'm
the
afraid
spirits.
of you. I know. You
Let
and your
the
ghosts.
spirits be with us. So you need to keep saying what you say, and you need to let people hear you. You need to keep working with children of suicide, children of AIDS, just plain children. And let the children be heard, and let the children listen. So I can't thank you enough for doing what you do. You need to believe, and you need to make believers. Any last words? We have about 30 seconds.
Don't let the bastards win.
Oh! There you go. Fight and legitimize peace. We really need to. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of One on One with the incredible Terry Dugan.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.